Sara stares at the hidden room in confusion. She has lived in the house her entire life, yet she has never seen this door before. The discovery immediately makes her uneasy. Before she can ask any questions, Dawn begins acting strangely. What had seemed like a normal request suddenly feels unsettling. Sara senses that something is wrong and starts to feel nervous. The room itself is small, isolated, and clearly designed to remain hidden from the rest of the house. As Sara looks around, she realizes that her father has been keeping a secret for a very long time. At that moment, the calm atmosphere disappears. Sara's confusion turns into fear as she begins to understand that she may have walked into a dangerous situation. The trust she once had in her father starts to crumble, and she realizes that the person she should have been able to rely on might be hiding something far darker than she ever imagined. What began as an ordinary afternoon is now becoming a nightmare, setting the stage for a shocking revelation that will change Sara's life forever. He was supposed to be her protector, her own father. Instead, he became the source of a nightmare that would destroy her life and shock the entire world. But how did everything reach such a horrifying point? What secret was hidden behind the walls of an ordinary family home? To understand the truth, we have to go back to the beginning. The story begins with a teenage girl named Sara. She is energetic, independent, and dreams of living life on her own terms without being controlled by anyone. One evening, Sara asks her parents for permission to attend a party at a friend's house. However, her father, Don, immediately refuses. His reaction seems unusually harsh, and there is a sense of fear and control in his voice that Sara doesn't fully understand. Hoping for support, Sara turns to her mother, but her mother gently tells her that it isn't a good idea and suggests she stay home. Disappointed and frustrated, Sara leaves the conversation feeling trapped and misunderstood. Even when her older sister tries to comfort her, Sara has already made up her mind. That night, after everyone in the house has gone to sleep, Sara quietly sneaks out. Outside, her friend Christopher is waiting for her, and together they head to the party without telling anyone where they are going. To Sara, it feels like a simple act of teenage rebellion. Neither of them realizes that this decision will trigger a series of events that will change their lives forever. Later that night, Sara's mother notices that her daughter has been unusually quiet and decides to check on her. When she opens the bedroom door and finds the room empty, panic immediately sets in. Sara is gone. The next morning, Sara finally returns home. The atmosphere inside the house is tense and uncomfortable. Don is furious. He angrily confronts Sara for disobeying him and sneaking out, accusing her of bringing shame to the family. Sara stands there caught between fear and frustration, unsure of how to respond. As the argument grows more intense, her mother steps in and tries to calm the situation before it spirals even further out of control. Sara runs to her room in tears. There, she vents her frustration to her mother and sister. Sara declares that she has had enough. In just a few months, she will turn 18, and the moment she does, she plans to leave home and start a new life with Christopher. What Sara doesn't realize is that someone is standing outside the door listening to every word. It is Don. He says nothing. His face shows no emotion. But as he quietly walks away, something about his silence feels deeply unsettling. From that moment on, he begins waiting for only one thing: Sara's 18th birthday. 3 months later, the day finally arrives. One afternoon, Sara is home alone, talking with Christopher on the phone, when Don calls her downstairs. His voice is calm and friendly, as though nothing is wrong. He asks for help carrying a heavy box into the basement. Without suspecting anything, Sara agrees. As they move the box downstairs, she notices a strange door she has never seen before. Confused, she pauses and stares at it. Before she can ask any questions, Don opens the door. Behind it is a small hidden room. And in that moment, Sara realizes that her father has been hiding a secret far darker than she could ever have imagined. Behind the door is a small hidden room. Sara looks inside, completely puzzled. In that moment, she has no idea that this discovery is about to change everything she thought she knew about her father, her home, and her future. Before Sara can fully understand what is happening, Don suddenly pushes her into the hidden room and slams the door behind her. Terrified, Sara rushes toward the exit and begins pounding on the door, calling for help. She begs her father to let her out, convinced that there must be some terrible misunderstanding. But no answer comes. Moments later, She hears the sound of a lock turning. The reality of her situation begins to sink in. Sara is trapped. Panic takes over as she searches every corner of the room, desperately looking for a way to escape. She examines the walls, checks the door, and looks for anything that might help her get out. But no matter what she tries, every attempt fails. Then something even more unsettling happens. The lights begin to flicker. For a brief moment, the room is filled with strange flashes of light before everything suddenly goes dark. The silence becomes overwhelming, and Sara feels fear tightening around her like a vice. As her eyes adjust to the darkness, she notices the large box she had helped carry downstairs. Hoping it might contain something useful, she quickly opens it. What she finds inside leaves her stunned. The box is filled with supplies, food, clothing, toiletries, and other necessities. At first, Sara doesn't understand why they are there. Then a horrifying thought enters her mind. These aren't supplies for a few days. They're supplies meant for someone expected to stay there for a very long time. For the first time, Sara realizes that this may not be a temporary punishment or a misunderstanding. Someone planned this, and that realization is far more frightening than the locked door itself. The horrifying truth slowly becomes clear to Sara. Everything inside the room had been prepared specifically for her. This was not a sudden decision. It was planned. For a long time, terrified and desperate, Sara rushes toward a small air vent and screams for help through it, hoping someone might hear her. But the moment her voice echoes upward, Don hears it. Without hesitation, he seals the vent from the outside. One by one, every possible connection to the outside world is cut off. The room becomes completely isolated. No sound leaving, no help entering. Now, even when Sara screams, her voice only returns to her as silence. Upstairs, Sara's mother begins to feel uneasy. She cannot explain it, but something inside her tells her that something is very wrong in the house. Her instincts grow stronger with each passing hour, filling her with quiet fear. Meanwhile, Don remains disturbingly calm. His silence is no longer comforting. It feels intentional, controlled, and deeply unsettling. Back in the hidden room, Sara continues to fight for escape. She searches every corner again, tries the door once more, and refuses to give up. But suddenly, the lights shut off again. Darkness fills the room completely. Time passes with no way to measure it. Then, eventually, Don returns to the basement, and Sara hears his footsteps approaching from the other side of the door. The moment Don opens the door, Sara sees a brief chance to escape. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushes him and runs toward the exit. For a few seconds, it feels like freedom might finally be within reach. But that hope disappears almost immediately. The outer basement door is locked. Before she can react, Don catches up to her and drags her back into the hidden room. This time, his expression is colder, more controlled, and far more terrifying than before. He looks at her and says quietly, "If you listen to me, I'll let you go." Sara refuses without hesitation. That single refusal changes everything. Don's behavior shifts again, becoming increasingly harsh. He begins using fear, intimidation, and emotional pressure, slowly trying to break her will rather than forcing her physically. As time passes, Sara's condition worsens. She becomes weak, exhausted, and overwhelmed by constant fear and isolation. The sense of time starts to blur inside the darkness of the room. A week goes by. Outside, the police begin investigating Sara's disappearance. Don speaks to them calmly, claiming that Sara had often talked about leaving home and wanting independence, suggesting that she may have run away on her own. At first, his explanation does not raise major suspicion. However, Sara's mother refuses to accept it. She insists that her daughter would never leave without telling anyone. Deep down, she feels something is terribly wrong, but the authorities advise patience, believing Sara may eventually reach out. Meanwhile, inside the hidden room, Sara is slowly breaking down. The place that should have been safe has become her prison. Each passing day feels identical: darkness, silence, and fear with no end in sight. The man she once trusted most has now become the reason she is trapped. Meanwhile, Christopher arrives at Sara's house, hoping to find out whether she is safe. But when he speaks to Don, he is met with a calm and controlled response. Don tells him that Sara has run away with a childhood friend, presenting a carefully constructed lie that conceals the truth. Time continues to pass. Inside the hidden room, Sara remains trapped, isolated from the world above. Eventually, her 18th birthday arrives. That day, Dawn comes down into the basement carrying a birthday cake. The candles are lit, and the atmosphere feels deeply unsettling, almost surreal. On one side stands the man responsible for her imprisonment, and on the other, he is pretending to celebrate her birthday as if nothing is wrong. He looks at her and says, "Make a wish." Sara understands the reality of her situation. She realizes that survival now depends on pretending to cooperate with him. For the moment, she forces herself to act calm, hiding her fear beneath a fragile mask of obedience. Dawn even gives her address, treating the situation as if it were normal, as if she were not being held against her will. Then he tells her she can have one wish. Without hesitation, Sara says she wants to be set free, but Dawn immediately refuses. In a cold and final tone, he says, "Not yet." That answer destroys the last remaining hope in her eyes. Forced to think quickly, Sara changes her request. Instead of freedom, she asks for a clock and a television. After a moment, Dawn agrees. For Sara, even these small items become a lifeline, her only connection to the outside world and a fragile way to keep track of time inside the darkness. The very next day, Dawn brings Sara a clock, just as she requested. But what he does not realize is that Sara is no longer focused only on survival. She has started thinking ahead. Quietly, she begins planning an escape. Using a simple food can, she carefully sharpens and hides a makeshift tool, keeping it out of sight. Every small action is done with patience, as she waits for the right moment. One day, she calls Dawn closer. He approaches slowly, but suddenly stops. Something feels off. His expression changes as suspicion grows in his eyes. In that instant, he realizes that Sara may be planning something against him. His calm disappears. A violent rage takes over. Dawn lashes out, attacking her without restraint. The situation escalates far beyond anything that had happened before, leaving Sara severely injured and unable to defend herself. Her screams fill the room, but the sound goes nowhere. She is completely alone. Time passes again. Another year goes by in the same darkness, the same silence, the same confinement. Sara's life continues under extreme control and isolation. During this time, she gives birth to a baby girl inside the hidden room. The child is born into the same prison-like environment she has been trapped in for years. Dawn shows no warmth or emotion toward the child. There is no change in him, only the same cold, distant presence. Outside, Sara's mother continues to live with the unbearable pain of her daughter's disappearance. Every day she thinks about Sara, slowly losing hope as time passes. She has no idea that her daughter is still alive, trapped beneath the very house she once called home. Meanwhile, inside the hidden room, Sara's suffering continues, and her situation grows even more tragic as the years slowly go on. Sara's life had now become an endless cycle of pain, captivity, and silence. Upstairs, the outside world continued as if nothing was wrong. Dawn tells his wife that he has received a promotion at work, presenting a picture of normal success and stability. But his wife is still haunted by the same unanswered question that has never left her mind. Where is Sara? She suggests something drastic. They should hire a private investigator to finally search for their missing daughter. The moment the words leave her mouth, Dawn's expression changes. A brief flash of anger appears in his eyes. Without giving a clear response, he turns away and walks off, making it clear he will not allow anyone to dig deeper into Sara's disappearance. It becomes increasingly obvious that he is willing to do anything to keep the truth buried. Meanwhile, deep in the basement, the television remains Sara's only connection to the outside world. Alongside her small daughter, it becomes their fragile window into life beyond the locked room, offering brief, bittersweet moments of normality in an otherwise suffocating existence. As time passes, Sara gives birth to a baby boy. Now she is the mother of 2 children, yet all of them live entirely within the confines of the hidden room. Later, tragedy strikes again when her young daughter becomes seriously ill with a high fever. Dawn brings medication, but it provides little relief. Watching her child suffer leaves Sara terrified and desperate. Tension rises between her and Dawn once more, and as always, the situation escalates into violence, further deepening the suffering inside the room. Outside, Christopher continues his search for answers. Despite years passing, he refuses to accept the idea that Sara simply vanished without a trace. His determination remains strong, and once again, he returns to Sara's house, still hoping to uncover the truth that has been hidden for so long. Christopher arrives at the house and speaks with Sara's sister. He tells her that Don has once again insisted Sara ran away with an old friend. However, hearing this only deepens her suspicion. Something about his explanation feels off, and she begins to believe that Sara may not be far away at all. Instead, she starts to suspect that Sara could still be somewhere inside the house. Meanwhile, in the hidden basement, time continues to pass. Sara's suffering does not stop. Her condition worsens, and she now becomes pregnant for a third time. Despite everything happening to her, Don remains emotionally detached, acting as though nothing has changed. Inside the house above, tension continues to build. Sara's mother is still unable to accept her daughter's disappearance and frequently confronts Don, demanding answers. The emotional strain between them grows heavier with each passing day. One day, during a heated argument, Don accidentally drops a set of basement keys. Sara's sister notices immediately. This small moment changes everything. Her suspicion, which had been growing quietly for some time, suddenly becomes much stronger. Unable to ignore it any longer, she gathers her courage and slowly makes her way toward the basement. Once inside, she begins noticing things that feel deeply unsettling. Unusual supplies, strange arrangements, and signs that something is being hidden far from the rest of the house. Her instincts tell her that something is terribly wrong. But before she can investigate further, Don suddenly appears. His presence alone is enough to overwhelm the atmosphere. Without saying much, he orders her to leave immediately and go back upstairs. Fearful and confused, she obeys. Back in the basement, life continues in darkness. Sara eventually gives birth again, this time to another baby boy. By now, she is emotionally and physically exhausted, completely broken by years of captivity. The reality of her situation sinks in deeper than ever. Not only her life, but her children's lives are now tied to the same prison she has never been able to escape. For the first time, Sara does something she has never done before. She pleads with Don. She begs him to let at least one of her children go, asking that the newborn baby be left with her mother so the child can have a chance at a normal life outside the darkness of the basement. Unexpectedly, Don agrees. Quietly, he places the baby outside the front door of the house and leaves. Moments later, Sara's mother opens the door and is shocked to find an infant lying there alone. She has no idea that the child is actually her own grandson. Beside the baby is a letter written in Sara's handwriting. In it, she claims she is unable to care for the child and asks her mother to raise him. But unknowingly, Sara has also left behind a second note. And that note changes everything. In it, she reveals the horrifying truth that Don has been keeping her imprisoned in the basement. When Don discovers the letter, his reaction is immediate and explosive. The fragile control he has maintained shatters, and he is consumed once again by rage. He storms down into the basement and unleashes his anger on Sara, leaving her even more broken and trapped than before. Time passes once again. Sara's older children continue to grow, but their entire existence remains confined within the same hidden room. They have never seen the outside world, never experienced freedom beyond those walls. But now, a new fear begins to take root in Sara's heart. She notices the way Don looks at her daughter. The same disturbing attention she once endured is now being directed toward her child. The realization terrifies her. At the same time, her daughter's health becomes another urgent concern as she struggles with asthma and frequent illness, making survival inside the basement even more fragile. One day, during a heavy rainstorm, water begins to leak through the basement ceiling. While trying to manage the damage, Sara notices a weakened section in the structure above her. For the first time in years, something shifts inside her. Hope. She begins carefully working at the weak spot, slowly and painfully creating a small opening. After much effort, she finally succeeds in making a hole. That night, using what little strength she has left, she shines light through the opening, desperately trying to signal for help. And this time, someone outside notices the light. For a brief moment, it feels like Sara might finally be saved. But that hope is destroyed almost immediately. The man who discovers the signal does not help her. Instead, he goes directly to Dawn and reports everything. The moment Dawn hears the news, something inside him snaps. His reaction is more violent and unhinged than ever before. He storms down into the basement, consumed by rage, and takes out his anger on Sara in a brutal attack that leaves her physically and emotionally shattered. In the aftermath, Sara suffers a devastating loss. Another innocent life is taken from her before it ever has a chance to begin. Dawn, in cold silence, removes the evidence and handles everything alone, as if erasing the consequences of his actions. Sara, however, is left with nothing but silence and emptiness. Even her tears feel distant now, as though she no longer has the strength to express her pain. Despite everything she has endured, Sara still holds onto one thought: her son who was taken away and sent outside. She often asks Dawn about him. To her surprise, Dawn tells her that the boy is growing up and preparing for a tournament. For the first time in years, Sara allows herself a small, fragile smile, comforted by the thought that at least one of her children is experiencing life outside. Meanwhile, her other children remain trapped in the basement, growing up without ever seeing the outside world. One day, her son questions Dawn, asking when they will be allowed to leave. Dawn responds coldly, saying they will only go outside when their mother learns how to behave. This answer confuses and angers the children. They begin to believe that Sara is the reason for their imprisonment, and their frustration slowly turns into resentment toward her. The realization breaks Sara emotionally as she listens to their anger, powerless to defend herself. But over time, the truth finally begins to surface. The children start to question everything they have been told. Eventually, they realize that they have misunderstood the situation and the blame they placed on their mother was misplaced. That night, they apologize to Sara. And for the first time in a long while, Sara finally has the chance to speak openly about the truth she has been forced to carry alone for so many years. The children are finally confronted with the truth: Dawn's real identity, his cruelty, and the full extent of the horror they have been living through for years. The revelation shatters them completely. Their understanding of the world collapses in an instant. Overwhelmed by fear and shock, Sara's daughter suffers another severe asthma attack, her fragile condition worsening under the emotional strain. When Dawn realizes that Sara has told the children everything, his fury erupts once again. He turns violent, attacking Sara without hesitation. But this time, her son steps in between them. For the first time, one of the children tries to protect their mother. This act of defiance only fuels Dawn's rage further. In response, he cuts off all power to the basement. Darkness floods the space once again, leaving them trapped in silence, fear, and suffocating isolation. Meanwhile, the world above begins to shift in ways Dawn can no longer control. He has already quit his job, and his financial situation continues to deteriorate. Slowly, his savings run out, and the bank eventually issues a foreclosure notice for the house. The same house that hides his darkest secret is now at risk of being taken away from him. When his wife questions him, Dawn avoids the truth, hiding behind excuses. But fear is now visible in his behavior. His control over everything is slipping. Below ground, Sara refuses to give up. Despite everything, she continues searching for a way out, persistently working on the ventilation system, holding on to the hope that she can still save her children. But Dawn, mentally collapsing under pressure, reaches a breaking point. He begins to believe there is no way to keep his secret hidden any longer. In his distorted thinking, he arrives at a horrifying decision. If he cannot control the situation, then everyone must die. He rigs his car so that toxic exhaust fumes are directed into the basement, intending to suffocate Sara and the children. However, before his plan can fully unfold, something unexpected happens. A familiar presence arrives at the house. It is Sara's third child, the son who was taken years earlier and raised away from the basement. His arrival marks a sudden and unpredictable turn in the situation, disrupting Dawn's plan at the very moment it begins. The moment Dawn sees his returning son, he freezes. For the first time, his confidence falters. His plan remains unfinished, suspended by shock and hesitation. Some time passes. Inside the basement, Sara's daughter suffers another severe asthma attack. This time, her condition becomes critical, and Sara is overwhelmed with fear. Desperate, She begs Don to take them to the hospital. Unexpectedly, he agrees. But there is a condition. Only Sara and her sick daughter are allowed to leave. Her son must remain behind in the basement. After years of captivity, Sara finally steps outside the house again. The outside world feels unfamiliar, almost unreal. As she looks around, memories of her past life slowly return. Freedom, childhood, and everything she once had now feel painfully distant, as though they belonged to someone else. At the hospital, a female doctor hands her medical forms to complete, but Sara deliberately avoids filling them out. Deep down, she knows that returning home with Don could mean never seeing the outside world again. In a moment of desperation, she spills water on the documents, using it as an excuse to delay the process. When Don steps away to get new forms, Sara seizes her chance. She rushes toward the doctor and breaks down in tears, clinging to her as her fear finally overflows. No words are needed. The desperation in her eyes says everything. At that exact moment, a police officer happens to be present. Both the doctor and the officer immediately sense that something is seriously wrong. They begin questioning Don, whose behavior quickly raises suspicion. Sara stands trembling, but her silence and fear confirm the truth. Within moments, the police arrest Don on the spot. The long-hidden nightmare finally comes to light. Don confesses to everything, admitting that he kept his own daughter imprisoned in the basement for years. Following the confession, police rush to the house. Inside, they discover and rescue Sara's son from the basement, bringing an end to years of silence, secrecy, and suffering. When Sara's mother learns the full truth, she completely breaks down. The realization that her daughter was suffering beneath the same house for so many years, while she lived just above it unaware, leaves her devastated beyond words. But at last, the nightmare is over. Don is taken into custody and sent to prison, finally held accountable for the years of suffering he caused. For the first time in a long time, Sara takes a deep, free breath. The weight that had been crushing her for years slowly begins to lift. She is reunited with her mother and sister, and her children are finally safe. No longer trapped, no longer hidden, they begin the long process of healing together as a family. Sometime later, Christopher comes to see her. Even after all those years, he never married. He had been waiting for Sara all along. Seeing him again overwhelms Sara with emotion, and tears fill her eyes. The two of them leave together, driving away from the house, the memories, and the painful past that stole so many years of her life. Finally, there is a sense of closure. A long, painful chapter comes to an end, replaced by the possibility of healing and a new beginning. And on this emotional yet hopeful note, the story closes. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful movie recaps and emotional stories like this. This story is a painful reminder of how silence, fear, and unchecked power can destroy lives for years without being noticed. It shows the importance of speaking up, trusting instincts when something feels wrong, and never ignoring warning signs in relationships or family environments. It also highlights how truth, even when delayed, eventually comes to light, and how justice, though slow, can still arrive. At its core, the story emphasizes that freedom, protection, and accountability are not optional in any human relationship. When control replaces love, the result is always destruction. If this story impacted you, take a moment to appreciate the importance of awareness and empathy in real life. Speak up when something feels wrong. Support those who may be silently struggling, and never ignore signs of abuse or control around you. For more emotional and powerful movie recap stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.